Good morning and happy Sabbath, everyone. We're glad you could join us today, whether that be in person or online. We have a few announcements as we begin this morning. Our Adventure Club is starting again with the addition of some COVID precautions. If your child is of the age of 4 to 7 and is interested in adventures, please plan to attend the first meeting/registration on Sabbath, October 3rd at 2 p.m. at the Calhoun Church. Meetings will be once a month on Sabbath afternoons. There will be a taco house night out on Tuesday, September 29 from 5 to 7 p.m. Mark your calendars and enjoy dinner out while supporting a local business as well as Coble Home and School. Upon checkout, let them know you're with Coble, and a portion of the earnings will go to Coble Home and School organization. Just a reminder that we are collecting tithes and offerings in the foyer, or you can make your donation to the church website. Please continue to support the church and its ministries with your financial contributions. At this time, Pastor David has an announcement.
Thank you, Josh. So just a couple of things. First of all, we have a second reading, and we're going to do both of these together. Stephanie Hill's church membership is going out to the Cahutta Adventist Church. But then we have two people coming in, Ben and Mary Maxon. They're transferring in from the Modesto Central Adventist Church. Is there a motion that you would like to accept these requests? Is there a second? All in favor? Aye, there you go. We've got some new people. Next slide. Let's talk about nominating committee. Did you know we're in the middle of nominating committee? We've talked about this a couple of times, but I want to bring it to your attention one more time because we have been meeting, there's been some decisions made, and we have some more decisions that are coming. And I want to remind you who your nominating team is. This is your entire team right here, including myself. You've got Mr. Robbie Herr, Carol Martinez, Liesl Meadows, Doug Nesmith, Darlene Peterson, Ava Ramirez, Stephen Reese, and Matthew Thomas. Now, why do you want to know these names? One, it'd be good for you to pray for this team. They're making important decisions about the leadership of our church. But number two, what's the best way to have a healthy church experience or a meaningful church experience? It's to be involved yourself. The more you give to this place, the more you get out of this place. And this team is looking for ways to engage members. The best way for this to happen sometimes is for you to recognize this is where I want to serve. Nobody has asked me to do this before, but this is what I would really like to do. You can contact any of these people on this list. So look at the name that you know best on this list. They are your avenue for church participation. Go up to them, email them, text them, and say, you know what, I have a passion for this particular area. A couple of weeks ago, I was leaving the church, and as I was leaving the church, someone came up to me and said, I have a passion in this area. I would love to serve. And we don't even have a position for that, but we're creating a position for that because we recognize that is a valuable thing. That's an area that needs attention. So whatever your vision is for this church of how you would like to be involved, talk to that team, because we want you to participate in ways that are meaningful for you. Now, with all that being said, I am looking for Carol Martinez, one of our team members, and I'm not sure if she is here yet. She is right behind. She snuck up on me. I'm going to invite her to come out here because she had a busy weekend last weekend. She is our Pathfinder director, and I'm excited about the report she has from what happened last week. Thank you, Carol. Give it up for Carol.
I don't know if I need to pick that up. Well, how many of you have been to Pathfinder Camporee? I figured most of you. Well, I'm going to tell you we had a camporee that looked nothing like the one you've been to in many ways. But because of all the changes that are going on in our world and because we're trying to be careful like the schools, like GCA and like Coble, we had to do a one-day camporee. Now, one of the kids said, how come we're calling it camporee if we're not spending the night? And I guess just because, that's tradition. But we didn't spend the night. We didn't stay in tents all together. And yet, if you get a bunch of Pathfinders outside, what do you have? You have a good time. They had a lot of fun anyway. So we did Pathfinder kind of stuff, but we just went 15 miles from here. It was a beautiful day, And we had a wonderful speaker. We had it on a flash drive. It was all very different. But there's our group of kids all having a good time. We spread out and made it look like camporee. We just didn't get to spend the night. I want you to see the canoes. How many of you ever did canoe honor and remember the one famous thing about canoe honor? You tip the canoe and you have to get back in, right? Well, you'll see some of them, they weren't really good at it. I wouldn't like give them an award, but they did get the honor. So we had a good time. We did some kite flying, and the juniors did that, and that was a lot of fun. But because we were close by, you know, we were able to have some academy kids there. We were able to have some families there. And I think it's just wonderful how God keeps letting us find ways to still show him love and show him worship out in nature and show ways to recreate, even though it's not exactly tradition. But we had a good time, and Pathfinders is still plugging along, and we pray that soon all these things will change and improve for all of us so that we can do the way we like to do. Thank you.
At this time, we're going to have children's story. And children, before you get up and come down, you see this group of people coming behind me. This is our saxophone group, and I am excited because they are going to play a song that was arranged by our very own Aiden Garapi, who is going to conduct them. So, kids, this is your chance to come on down. Remember, we are not collecting the lamb's offering. If you want to support that very important fund, you can do that in the back, or you can do that online. Kids, you can share a mat with your sibling, but you don't have to share a mat with your sibling. But if you guys want to make your way down, and Miss Darlene will be giving our children's story.
Good morning, boys and girls. I was getting a little nervous. No little people were coming down here, but I'm glad we have a few people to tell our story to this morning. So even though you guys are pretty young, I'm pretty sure you've all experienced something called disappointment. It's kind of a big word. So disappointment is something that we maybe have been hoping for. Maybe it's something that we were looking forward to doing, and then that thing, we didn't get that thing, or that event didn't happen. Emily, what has been something that has been disappointing to you over the last few months?
Not getting to go on vacation during the pandemic.
Oh, that was disappointing. We didn't get to go on a trip that we had planned back in March when the pandemic hit. And Georgia, is there anything that has been disappointing to you?
I can't have ice cream for breakfast.
Oh, is that disappointing to any of you guys not having ice cream for breakfast? I saw a lot of hands go up all across the audience. So whatever it is, at almost any age, we've all gone through some disappointment. Some of you may have heard this story before, but it's worth repeating. We adopted a new little kitten back at the end of July. And if you guys can look up at the screen, this was Emily. Finding out that we surprised them, they didn't know we were driving up to meet somebody in Dalton to get our kitten. And then Georgia, and they were just beaming about this new little kitten. His mommy had left him and his brother and sisters somewhere up in Chattanooga. And we had a friend in Maryland, where we used to live, that found out that we were looking for a kitten. And so she got us in touch with this person. Everybody can say, "Aw. He's so cute." And we met this person in Dalton, and we brought this little kitten home. Emily, what did we decide to name this little cutie?
Oliver.
Oliver. And what was kind of interesting about his name that we found out later?
His sister's name is Olive, and we didn't even know until we named it.
So crazy. He had a sister that went to another family, and they named the little girl Olive. Yeah. Let's see, Georgia, we're going to go to the next slide. You've got a funny story about Oliver. Tell us about this slide.
One morning, Molly was making breakfast, and she had to get something from the fridge, so she got the stuff, and then a few minutes later, we heard meowing, and we looked everywhere, and then we looked in the refrigerator, and we saw Ollie sitting there.
So there was Oliver being cute as little kittens. He'd gotten stuck in the refrigerator for a few minutes till we discovered him. So on the first Friday of this month, it was Labor Day weekend, and we noticed that he wasn't quite acting like himself. He was kind of, oh, you guys know him. I'm so sorry, honey. I had to do it. Surprise. Coach takes naps with cats. So Oliver wasn't feeling well, it seemed. He wasn't eating, he wasn't drinking. He would go to his litter box, and he wasn't doing anything there but just crying. And so we thought something isn't right. That evening, he started to throw up. And we thought, this is not good. It was Labor Day weekend, and we had to drive him over to an emergency vet clinic in Rome. You better go to the next slide, or my husband will never forgive me. After that, the vet checked him out, and there was Oliver after he'd gotten checked out. And we found out that where he needs to use the bathroom, it was blocked. And they were afraid that he could have possibly had some problems with his insides, his organs, and he was going to need a surgery. And it was going to cost about $2,000, and it was probably going to go up from there. You can hold on that slide. There was a chance that he had already had some damage, and he was going to need a lifetime of some special food and a lot of care. So the doctor said if we weren't going to do the surgery, the second option was to put him to sleep, which was pretty sad. Oliver was only about 6 or 8 weeks old here. That was not good news to us. I thought he was probably going to need medicine. We would bring him home that night, and we'd have him back, and that was going to be the end of it. We had a heartbreaking decision to make. That was very disappointing to us. This little kitten who was only a few months old, we didn't want to give up on him that easily, but that was a lot of money. So while we were thinking about it and kind of loving on him, a vet tech came into the room, and she's like, I have a third option. So our first was this really expensive surgery, and the second was to put him to sleep, which we didn't want to do. And the third one, she said, I have a vet tech friend who's not working tonight, and I sent a picture to Ollie, and she wants to take him. And she has a clinic that she works at in Alabama, and she wants to find the money to do the surgery for him. And she said, what do you think of that? I thought, oh my goodness, that sounds like the best option, right? Out of all the others, sounds like the best. And I'd been praying, and I knew the girls were praying at home, and we had friends praying. Addie and Eden, you guys know them, they were praying. There was a catch, though, to this. We were going to have to give Ollie up. We were going to have to surrender him, and we were going to have to sign a paper that said he wasn't ours anymore. He wouldn't be our kitten, but remember, the other options were a lot of money or putting him to sleep. So we left there that night, we signed the papers, and we gave Oliver up to the vet clinic. The next morning was Sabbath, and I had a call from a lady named Courtney, and she was the lady who I hadn't even met. She was the vet tech that said, "You can't give up on that little kitten." And the crazy thing was, she didn't even really care for cats. She didn't have any cats. She had a couple of big dogs, but she saw his little picture from the friend, and she said, "You can't give up on this little kitten." And we're happy to share that Oliver came through the surgery, and he's living at a clinic in Cedar Bluff, Alabama, at Deaton Veterinary Clinic. And Courtney has kind of taken him. That was him last week. She keeps me up to date on Oliver's status. She's invited us to come over and see him. And I realized that even though, as I was thinking about this later, even though I had an idea, or we had an idea of the perfect plan for Oliver and the perfect answer to our prayer, which was for Oliver to come back with us, God had an even better answer for Oliver than we could have imagined. And boys and girls, when you go through disappointments in life, and you will have them, we have to learn kind of how to deal with them and how to give them up to God. And God has all kind of creative ways that he can work with our disappointments. And I want you guys to listen to Pastor Smith today as we hear about somebody in the Bible who's gone through some disappointments and how he dealt with them. Thank you guys so much for listening. You may return to your seat.
With all the craziness going on in the world right now, it gets so easy to get lost and overwhelmed, but we serve a God who's so much bigger than all of that. So as we present this message to you this morning, I want to invite you to just block out all the worry of this world and just reflect on the lyrics and worshiping a God who takes care of all of our extra baggage.
Alone in my sorrow and dead in my sin, lost without hope and no place to begin. Your love made a way to let mercy come in, but death was arrested and my life began. Ash was redeemed, only beauty remains. My orphan heart was given a name. My mourning grew quiet, my feet rose to dance. When death was arrested and my life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new. Now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new. Now life begins with you. Released from my chains, I'm a prisoner no more. 'Cause shame was a ransom faithfully bore. He canceled my debt and he called me his friend. Jesus arose with our freedom in hand. Death was arrested, my life began. Death was arrested, my life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new. Now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new. Now life begins with you. Oh, we're free, free, forever we're free. Come join the song of all the beings. Yes, we're free, free, forever, amen. When death was arrested, my life began. Oh, we're free, free, forever we're free. Come join the song of all the beings. Yes, we're free, free, forever, amen. When death was arrested, my life began. When death was arrested, my life began. Death was arrested, my life began.
All of us have something in our lives, whether it's something that happened or something that's a part of us that's broken. But one thing that we have to remember is that God can pick up those pieces and put them together in a way that we never thought was possible before.
All these pieces, broken and scattered, in mercy gathered, mended and whole, empty-handed, but not forsaken. I've been set free. I've been set free. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Oh, I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see. Oh, I can see you now. Oh, I can see the love in your eyes, laying yourself down, raising up the broken to life. You take our failure, you take our weakness, you set your treasure in jars of clay. So take this heart, Lord, I'll be your vessel, the world to see your life in me. Oh, amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. raising up the broken to life.
Please stand with me for prayer. Father God, thank you for your amazing grace and that you gave us the Sabbath day so that we can rest. I pray that you will be with us today and be with Pastor David as he shares your word, and help it not to be his words, but to be your words. God, I pray that you will be with those who are not able to make it here today and help everybody to be able to stay healthy, especially right now with all the sickness around the world. And Lord, I pray that you will help us to draw into you, and thank you that you put us back together as we sang just a bit ago. In your name I pray, amen.
Thank you, worship team. We're in the middle of the beginning of a new series called Emotional Baggage. You've heard of this before, right? The idea that some of us are walking around with emotional baggage. A lot of times the context where we hear about this would be maybe in the dating scene, right? Like maybe stay away from this person because she or he has some emotional baggage. Maybe you were thinking about asking someone out tomorrow, but you realize they have some emotional baggage. We all have some kind of emotional baggage. We have things where we have picked up stuff from some kind of trauma in our lives, something that has gone wrong, and it kind of slows us down. It becomes sort of a part of our person, and we carry it around, and it's the emotional baggage that can ruin not only our own lives at times, but it can have an impact on the lives of everybody around you. Maybe right now you're thinking about a person in your life that has significant emotional baggage. But today I wanted to think more in terms of what are the emotional baggage things that I carry right now? What are the things that I've experienced that have had a negative impact with the way I interact with the world? And the reason why we're doing this is because it feels like this is a year where we've picked up a lot of emotional baggage. Because if we're honest with ourselves, 2020 has been kind of a doozy of a year, right? Am I alone in thinking this? 2020 is quite the year, and it has offered us so many kind of negative things. But it's offered us one bright, shining light. Of all the negative things that have happened in 2020, if nothing else, it has given us a lot of good memes, right? Let's look at a couple of these. If 2020, I'm going to put this on the screen, if 2020 was a scented candle, you've probably seen this, this would be it. Or this one right here. If 2020 was a slide, this would be it. It starts off so good, so fun. If 2020 were a piñata, this would be the 2020 piñata. You whack that thing and you have something coming. And then finally, this is a different kind of meme because I think this explains a lot of feelings. My thoughts about 2020 plans versus my actual 2020 life. A little bit of a disappointment. We have these visions. Do you remember the New Year? Can any of you think back that far? It feels like it was about 10 years ago, right? The new year going into 2020, it was exciting because we were crossing into a new decade. We were out of the teens, into the 20s, and it just felt like the year was loaded with so much potential. We were excited about the things that were coming, and we had those visions about what life could look like and how great my life was going to be. Maybe you made some New Year's resolutions back then. Maybe you made some plans about what your year was going to look like, and suddenly everything shifted. Everything changed, and we were filled with a word of, I think the best word for me is disappointment. The disappointment of plans that have changed because we had one idea in our mind of what it was going to look like, what it was going to feel like, what it was going to be like, and then suddenly all of that got upended. In the newsletter that I sent out this week, that I assume every single one of you studiously reads, and you wait by the inbox for that thing to come out, I was talking about if there was like a taste of 2020, it would be the taste of carob. And I just wanted to bring this back because I was reminded of a photo of a friend of mine that really expresses this. Let's put this one up. This is a friend, his name's Connor. He's in college now, but this is him when he was younger, tasting carob for the first time. Has any of you ever tried carob? I'm just really curious if high school students have even, okay, a couple of you have. Okay, mercifully, most of you have not. This is one of the curses of the health food movement. A couple of decades ago, this was really big stuff, as a lot of people were trying to wean themselves off of chocolate. And as they were trying to say, maybe chocolate's not the best thing for me. And so they decided to do a replacement with carob. And anytime you have health food and there's a replacement, usually it's a really bad idea. Like if you're a meat eater, you're probably not very excited about Veggie Links, right? It doesn't really replace it. You would rather just skip it. Well, the worst of the replacements, by far, and it's almost died out, thankfully, is carob. And that's the kind of reaction that you would get if you sink your teeth into carob. But here's the problem. When I was growing up, this was a prevalent thing. Lots of people were getting into this carob substitute. And so you'd go to a good old-fashioned potluck, and you'd be going down the line, and you see a plate of chocolate chip cookies, or you see a plate of brownies, and your heart skips a beat because this is awesome. But then you grab that thing and you take a big bite. And as you bite into it, you find out it's not what you were expecting. It's terrible. It's a disappointment from what you were hoping was going to happen. And this is 2020. A lot of you were going into this year thinking this was going to be your senior year. Well, it is your senior year, but you thought it was going to have certain rituals to it. You thought you were going to have certain things that you were going to do. You had to you've seen this happen for years. You've seen your peers go before you. You know what happens senior year, but suddenly they don't happen. Some of you that I've talked to had plans about a big vacation. This was the year we were going to go over here. We'd been saving up for this. We'd been planning this vacation for years. And suddenly, the time when you were going to be on vacation, you're stuck at your house under quarantine, and you still don't have plans about when to take that vacation, when to celebrate that anniversary. There's so many things about life right now that has brought us disappointment. But it's not even really about 2020, is it? Because the truth is that in life, we are constantly facing disappointments. It starts in our childhood. Like as a kid, do you remember what it was like when you were a super little kid and you get your hopes up about what you were going to do, and then your parents changed the plans? Like maybe they said they were going to take you out to the park, or maybe we're going to go out for ice cream. And if they decided to change those plans because the situation changed, it was like your life fell apart. Like we were not born to be experiencing disappointment. It's not in our DNA, apparently, because we fall apart over the slightest changes of life when we're young. But as we get older, the disappointments continue, and they become actually more significant. We get more numb to the small changes of life, but there's other things in life that begin to weigh down on us, where it becomes hard to go through life with disappointment. Maybe you thought you were going to be dating this person this year, and that didn't happen, so that's disappointment. Maybe you thought you were going to make it onto the team this year, but that didn't happen, so that's disappointment. Maybe you thought your career was going to go this direction, but it's going some other direction. That's disappointment. And then there's the disappointment that other people feel with us. Sometimes the things that we do, we are disappointing other people, and we feel that as well. So with all of that set up, I want to look at a particular passage in the Bible to think about what it means in our lives, because this is inevitable. In 2020 or any other year, there will be disappointments that we must experience. And so with that, I want to turn to Genesis chapter 37, to a very familiar story. Genesis chapter 37. Genesis chapter 37, starting with verse 2. It says this is the account of Jacob and his family. When Joseph was 17 years old, he often tended his father's flocks. He worked for his half-brothers, for the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. But Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things that his brothers were doing. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his brothers' children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. So one day, Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. But his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. They couldn't say a kind word to him. We're going to keep going. One night, Joseph had a dream. And when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. "Listen to this dream," he said. "We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly my bundle stood up, and lo and behold, your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before mine." His brothers responded, "So you think you will be our king, do you? Do you actually think you will reign over us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and the way he talked about them. Soon Joseph had another dream, and again he told his brothers about it. "Listen, I have had another dream," he said. "The sun, the moon, the 11 stars, they bowed low before me." And this time he told the dream to his father, as well as to his brothers. But his father scolded him. "What kind of dream is that?" he asked. "Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come to bow to the ground before you?" But while his brothers were jealous of Joseph, his father wondered what the dream meant. We've grown up with this story, but I want you to think of it from a fresh perspective. If when you hear this introduction of the story of Joseph, you don't feel something kind of rise up inside of you and think about this guy and say, "What a little punk," right? If that's not kind of your reaction when you hear the story of Joseph, I think you're reading it wrong. How many of you have siblings? Okay, so people with siblings, if you have a sibling, I think you can understand the little punk side of Joseph. So let's unpack this a little bit. First of all, Joseph was young. He was 17 years old. In this crowd, that might be slightly on the older side, but he is almost the youngest of the group that he has. He's 17 years old. His brothers are going somewhere up into their 30s. And so this pretentious little 17-year-old seems to see himself as the ruler of the household. Somehow he sees himself as someone who's rising above. Because when he gets this dream, this is maybe something that you would say, "You know what, just zip it." If you have a dream like this and you're 17 and almost all of your brothers are older than you, this isn't something you should necessarily share with them. You just have to keep opening your mouth, Joseph. I mean, first it happens once, and he already gets a negative response from his brothers. And it happens a second time, and what does he do again? "Oh, funny thing, I had another dream. It sounds really reminiscent. And you know who happens to be the leader in that dream? Me." This guy doesn't get it. Either he's missing something socially, or somehow he just doesn't even care. And I want you to think of it from this perspective, being the youngest-ish, next save for his younger brother Benjamin, and the older ones being somewhere probably up in their 30s. I want you to think of it this way for the high school students here. I'm not actually sure what the age of all your teachers are, but let's go with like Mr. Salter. I think this would probably be about right. He's probably actually a little bit young for this, but this would be like you, as a junior or so, saying, "You know what? I see myself as rising above you, and I think that you have to listen to me." It's just not really in your place. And as we look at this and we see kind of the different things about it, there's all kinds of odds that are stacked up to make Joseph just more despisable, right? First of all, there's the fact that he is his dad's favorite. How many of you, at some point in your life, have stopped, if you have a sibling, and paused to consider who is the favorite among you? I'm not sure if there's a sibling among us who hasn't had that thought cross your mind. At some point, you start looking around and you start noticing maybe the way that your mom or your dad talks so much about all the accomplishments of your siblings. Maybe you've thought about the way that your mom or your dad seems to go easier on your younger brother or your younger sister, right? They don't really punish them the way that they punish me. Or maybe they let them do things earlier than they let me do them. And the things start kind of stacking up, and eventually you begin to have the questions. Maybe this is the child that's the favorite child. Or maybe you're on the other side and you're thinking, "We know who's the favorite. It's me." Like some of you know that, right? Some of you are like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm the favorite." But when you're suspecting that your parents favor one of you and it's not you, it can really start to get under your skin. And so eventually, at some point in life, I think all of us do this, we'll come up to our parents and we'll be like, well, who actually is your favorite? And what do they say? They never answer straight, right? Like, oh, I love you all the same. I love you all just differently. Like, you're all unique, and I love you in your own special way. I don't have a favorite. I couldn't pick a favorite between you guys. And in the back of your head, you're thinking, whatever. I know who the favorite is. But imagine if your parent not only says who their favorite is, but then they give a very clear indicator of what that favorite child is by giving them a very tangible, clear symbol, gesture, that every time you see it, it says, this child right here, this is the favored one. And of course, for Joseph, what's the sign? It's the coat. It's the coat that he wears. Now, here's the thing that we need to think about the coat. I don't want to ruin the images in your mind. We don't know if it was a multicolored coat. It makes for a really cool children's story when we're like looking through the children's book and he puts on this coat and it's flamboyant with all of its many different colors. And it's like, man, this guy's got like a sly coat compared to all these other drab coats around him. We don't actually know what it looks like, right? Because we don't actually know what the word is. Well, there's two words here. When it talks about the beautiful coat, in some translations, my translation that I just read, or some translations will say the coat of many colors. Some will say the long coat or the, ordinate coat. The reason why there's different translations for this is because we know the word tunic, basically. Like there's some kind of robe thing that the guy's wearing, but then there's an adjective that goes before it, and we don't actually know what that word means. It could mean colorful. It could mean long sleeves. The only thing that we know is we see it used in that combination one other place in the Bible to describe King David's daughter as something that she's wearing. And scholars think that the idea here is that it's not about a fashion statement that his dad's giving him this coat of many colors or the coat that's long or whatever it is. It's not a fashion statement that he's making, but it's a signal of status. It's the kind of cloak that someone higher up would wear. It's the kind of cloak that perhaps a queen would wear. In fact, there are a lot of translations that say a long coat, because that's one of the possible ideas. And they think that maybe if that's true, the common people would wear the short sleeves because they're the ones that are engaged in the real work. They need their arms free. They need their arms free so that it doesn't get tangled up in the work. But the long sleeves are for the higher ups, the ones who are, checking on things, making sure that the other people are doing their jobs. And so when you see this situation where Joseph is bringing a bad report about his brothers, which I immediately think, what a tattletale. What a tattletale this Joseph is. Perhaps the role he's actually playing is the one of supervisor. And as the intermediary between his brothers, who are all older than him, save one, and his dad, as he's checking up on their work, making sure that they're doing a good job. It's not just about bad behavior. It's not just about snitching on them because they ate too much, or they ate their dessert before their dinner, whatever. He's talking about the work that they do because Joseph, perhaps, has been elevated to a status above his brothers already at the age of 17. And part of the reason why that this may have already happened, it may have already been clear that the guy who was supposed to get the birthright wasn't going to get it. This was Reuben. Reuben's the oldest brother, and he should have been the guy that was going to be the sort of in charge, get the biggest share of inheritance, have the birthright, which was such a big cultural important thing in that time. But Reuben made a mistake. Couple chapters earlier, there's some weird family incest stuff that takes place where he sleeps with one of his father's women. And then books like chapters down the road towards the death of Joseph, or about at the time of the death of Jacob, Jacob makes it clear that he's not getting the birthright because of what he did. He brings up this baggage from the past. And so it's perhaps already happening here that Jacob recognizes because of what Reuben did, he's going to throw away that birthright from him, take it and give it to someone else. And rather than just going down the line to the next oldest, to the next oldest, to the next oldest, he jumps all the way across them right to Joseph and says, you're the one. Because as it says here, he was the one given to him in his old age, but also the one given to him from the wife that he truly loved. All this is the baggage of Jacob's family as we jump into the story of Joseph. But here's what I want you to realize. When Joseph comes into here, it's not just about the dreams. The dreams didn't have to happen for Joseph to see himself as the person with the most potential in the room. Joseph already saw himself as the leader over his brothers. He already saw himself as going somewhere great. And then you get to this place where he has the dreams and it seals the deal for him. He recognizes that God has ordained this moment to happen and he is going to rise above everyone else. So with that kind of backstory, I want you to imagine the paradigm shift for him when suddenly he went from that world, that perspective, that expectation to being sold as a slave in Egypt and being a servant to everyone else and having his freedoms taken away from him. And suddenly, Joseph is living in the land of disappointment. Now, here's what I want you to think about. It's easy for us sometimes when we read through a character like Joseph in the Bible to look at a big picture of the scenario. We see where he starts, we see where he ends, and it feels very neat and tidy when you look at it from a far distance. But the reality is, for Joseph, he's zoomed in on the moment, and he doesn't know what's going to come next. And so you see this process where he goes and he finds himself in the land of the Egyptians. He tries to serve well under Potiphar, and what happens? That's taken away from him as well, and he's kicked off to prison. And once he gets to prison, things are going well, and he thinks he's kind of rising to the top, but the expectations he have there become shattered as well. But I'm going to pause there and come back to that. The thing I want you to think about is Joseph had to be content in the waiting. Joseph had to live in the moment of waiting for God to move in his life. He didn't know when God was going to make things right. He didn't know if God was going to make things right. It's somewhere around 13 years because he became king, or he became serving under Pharaoh at the age of 30. Age of 17, he was sold into slavery. So it took a 13-year process for him to go through the waiting moments, not knowing if he was ever going to see the light of day from that prison. Life is often like that. When we zoom in to the day by day that we are experiencing, we don't know what comes next. We don't see how the thing that we're going to could possibly fit well into a bigger narrative of where we want our lives to go. We have to be in a moment of waiting sometimes where you have disappointments in your life and you have to sit with them and wait to see what's next. This happens all the time in the Bible. You look at Sarah. Sarah was expecting to have the promised child. It's not until she's at age 90 that she gets pregnant. Who would have ever thought that at age 90 the promise would be fulfilled? But every year, every decade up to that, she had to live in that moment of waiting. You fast forward to the story of Moses, and Moses has this vision about what his life's about. He thinks that his life is about freeing the Israelites. He has a passion for his people. He wants to see them released from bondage. And in a moment of passion, he acts on that at age 40. And what happens? He becomes a wanted man. He becomes a fugitive because he kills a man in that moment. And so he runs away to the desert. At that moment, he has 40 years of waiting before he gets to the moment where the Red Sea is parted. Again, it's easy to zoom out at the life of Moses and see a life of purpose, to see a life that's making a difference, to see one of the most prominent leaders in the Old Testament. But if you would zoom in into the years in the desert, Moses doesn't know that. Moses doesn't think his life is amounting to much. Moses doesn't know if his life is even headed in the right direction. Think about how this applies to your life today. There are disappointments that you've had. There are things that you have expected to happen that are not happening. And when we zoom in into the moment, sometimes it doesn't feel like we're headed where we want to be headed. We don't feel like we're living out the passions that God has given us to live out. But we have to be content with those moments of waiting. But let's fast forward here to the story of Joseph, because it gets worse for Joseph. we get to the end of his prison time in chapter 40, verses 13 to 15. It says this, it says, within 3 days, Pharaoh, this is his prediction of the dreams as he's interpreting dreams for other people. Chapter 40, verse 13. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift you up and restore you to your position as his chief cupbearer. And please remember me and do me a favor when things go well for me. Mention me to Pharaoh so that he might let me out of this place. For I was kidnapped from my homeland, the land of the Hebrews, and now here I am in prison, and I did nothing to deserve it. You can see almost the sense of his emotional fortitude cracking. He's been at this for somewhere around 11 years now. Over a decade has gone by, and he's not seeing himself rising out of the scenario that he's in. Every place that he's been in, he's invested himself deeply into. But he's still not out of it yet. And as he realizes that his interpretation of this dream, if it's right, this man's going to be free and have a close ear to the king, he kind of throws out a flare. Please, remember me when you get out. But what happens? You go down to the end of the chapter 21, verse 21. He then restored the chief cupbearer, that's Pharaoh, to his former position so he could again hand Pharaoh his cup. But Pharaoh impaled the chief baker, that was the bad dream, just as Joseph had predicted when he interpreted his dream. And Pharaoh's chief cupbearer, however, forgot all about Joseph, never giving him another thought. 2 years goes by before the cupbearer remembers Joseph. And Joseph, the whole time, has to continue waiting. There's a story by, Laura Story, a singer-songwriter. And there's a book of hers where she talks about multiple struggles that she goes through. And there's this one particular section where she's talking about processing this with a pastor friend of hers. And I don't know what the situation was. I'm not sure what the struggle was. But he replied to her with this. He said, I think that in this season of life, you just simply need to wait on the Lord. Yes, that's it. I need to wait on the Lord, she says. Great. What steps do I take to do that? You're not getting me, Laura, the pastor said. Wait is wait. There are no steps. You just surrender, and then you simply sit tight. Maybe for you, the disappointment that you have in your life right now is a moment where you just have to sit still for a moment. Maybe it's a moment where you stop striving against it and simply come to terms with it and you accept it. That's the waiting. But then there's another part of the Joseph story, and that is the idea that wherever you are in your life right now, whatever it is, you can invest into that moment. You can lean into that present time. You don't have to wait for the future to happen to start being energized about the present. I think a lot of times when things don't go our way, when we're disappointed about something that happened, we just want to sort of give up until the cards change, until we get dealt a better hand. I was thinking about this. Here's another great one from 2020. There's a meme about NyQuil. Have you seen this one before? Instead of NyQuil, it's YearQuil. Can we just hibernate away for 2020? Can we just take this new NyQuil pill, instead of NyQuil, it's a YearQuil, and we can just end 2020 in a nice sleep and be over with it and just get on to the next thing. And it's funny, right? But we do this with life in so many ways. We don't literally sleep it away, but there's so many times where we're not willing to lean into the present moment and to invest of ourselves, to lean into that and give our energy into the situation, even when it's not an inspiring situation. It doesn't straight out say this, but the image you get from the Bible when you look at the life of Joseph is that he invests heavily in the present moment where he's in. How else would he rise in serving under Potiphar? How else would he rise when he's serving the prison guard? It's because in every situation that he's in, rather than waiting for his circumstances to change, he leans into that present moment and gives it all that he has. Psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl says this: what matters is not the meaning in life in general, but rather the specific meaning of a person's life at any given moment. So in other words, you are figuring out the meaning of your life. The significance of your life is being built by these moment-by-moment choices in the present moment right now. You get to choose whether you're building a life that's full of meaning. Another way of saying this, Annie Dillard says this: how we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. What we do with this hour and that one is what we are doing. Or to put it more succinctly, philosopher Albert Camus says, life is a sum of all your choices. Choose this moment to give it your best shot right now. Don't wait for the thing to change. Lean into the moment. Whatever it is that you're disappointed about, whatever it is that you're waiting to hope to change, invest in the current moment. But I want to fast forward to the very end here, towards the end of Joseph's life. It's the very end of Jacob's life in Genesis chapter 50, verse 19. Genesis chapter 50, verse 19. This is perhaps the climax of the story. If you're trying to figure out what is this all about, what is the life of Joseph all about, it comes down to these few verses right here. The context is this: Jacob has just died. At this point, the brothers have come back to Egypt. The dads come to Egypt. Joseph has saved them as well as saved so much of the surrounding people around Egypt. He's taken good care of them. He's put them up at a place to stay. He's one of the most powerful men in all of Egypt. But then the dad dies. The patriarch of the family dies, and the brothers flip out about this because the brothers have been going through this process of reconciliation with Joseph, but they're wondering the whole time if Joseph is just holding things together until dad dies, because he knows that, or they know that their dad wants to see peace among them, but they're worried as soon as their dad dies, what's going to be their fate now? What is Joseph going to do to them? And so they go to Joseph and they throw themselves at his feet, bowing down to him, again, just like the dream had predicted. Verse 19, but Joseph replied, "Don't be afraid of me. Am I God that I can punish you? You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so that I could save the lives of many people. Don't be afraid. I will continue to take care of you and your children." And so he reassured them by speaking kindly to them. Centerpiece of the story right here. You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. It reminds me of the passage in Romans 8:28. If you flip over to Romans 8:28, Paul says something very similar. He says, "And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them." Sometimes we've taken this text and we've sort of misapplied it. We've gotten this idea, well, what this means is that everything will go fine for me if I just simply love God and follow God. But the idea that's being displayed here, as you see in the life of Joseph, is that whatever the situation is, God can take from it and make something good out of it. It's not to say that life is going to be all roses, but whatever it is that you face, whatever negative experience, no matter how bad it is, God can redeem that moment and turn something powerful and good and use it for his better purposes, because God is that way. There's one other thing I want to look at about this. And that's that this story of Joseph, that particular line, what God intended for evil, or what you intended for evil, God intended for good. We see the gospel coming out already in the book of Genesis right here. It's this moment where the brothers come to him and they throw themselves down. They're trying to earn their way to Joseph, trying to find a way out, trying to relieve themselves of the guilt that they have. And Joseph, much like the story of the prodigal son, says, it's not about you bowing down. Stand up, you're my family. You belong here, and I forgive you. The bad that you've done, there's something that's been redeemed and that's good that's coming out of it. And we see the picture of the gospel coming through the words of Joseph towards his brothers, which I think is an important thing to remember. That the trauma you go through, the disappointments of life, are oftentimes the very best speakers and proclaimers of the gospel. Some of the most powerful moments that you have to live out gospel, to let that transformation be seen through the way that you live, is by going through the disappointments, the struggles, the sorrows. That's where the gospel comes most clearly. Let's end with this. Going back to Laura's story and her book about her life. She describes going through a disappointing season after she marries young newlyweds and discovers that her husband has brain cancer. Totally upends their life. Going through all the surgeries, all the treatments, is able to be a survivor and carry through with that. But it changes their lives forever because he's left with some real life debilitations. Her husband's memory starts to completely disappear. He's not able to remember things like he used to. His vision's severely impaired as well. It's so bad that once they have their first child, they realize that he can't even be the breadwinner or full caretaker of her children, their children. As they begin to question what life is going to look like, and they begin to question all the dreams and the aspirations that they had for their future, she penned the words of the now famous song, Blessings. I just want to read a couple of the lyrics. Because what if your blessings come through raindrops? What if your healing comes through tears? What if 1,000 sleepless nights are what it takes to know you're near? What if trials of this life are your mercies in disguise? Because when friends betray us, when darkness seems to win, we know that pain reminds this heart that this is not our home. What if my greatest disappointments or the aching of this life is the revealing of a greater thirst this world can't satisfy? What if trials of this life, the rain, the storms, the hardest nights, are your mercies in disguise?
Wanna know the
Let's pray. Father God, may you take the disappointments of our lives. May you take the tiredness, the wornness, take those ashes and make it into something beautiful. May we trust you in the moment. May you trust you in the process. We give it to you, God, we pray. In the name of Jesus. Amen. Go in peace. Happy Sabbath.